Sarah had always found solace amidst the towering shelves and hushed aisles of the Oak Haven Public Library. As a librarian, she was surrounded by stories, by worlds both real and imagined, and she felt a deep connection to the written word. The library was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the pages of a book and forget the mundane worries of everyday life. She knew every nook and cranny of the building, every genre and author, every secret corner where a reader could escape into their own private literary haven. The restricted section, tucked away in the dimly lit back corner of the second floor, held a particular allure for Sarah. It housed the library's rare and fragile volumes, books that were deemed too valuable or delicate for general circulation. Access was limited, requiring special permission from the head librarian, Mrs. Gable, a stern but ultimately kind woman who had been Sarah's mentor and friend for years. Sarah rarely had reason to venture into the restricted section, but she knew its contents held untold stories, whispers from the past waiting to be rediscovered. One particularly slow Tuesday afternoon, while shelving returned books, Sarah noticed a small, leather-bound volume tucked away on a bottom shelf in the restricted section. It wasn't catalogued, and it didn't have any identifying marks on its spine. Its dark, worn cover was smooth to the touch, and it felt strangely heavy in her hands. Curiosity piqued. Sarah carefully pulled the book from the shelf. It was smaller than most of the other volumes in the section, almost pocket-sized, and its pages were yellowed with age. There was no title, no author, no indication of its origin. It was a complete mystery. Sarah knew she should probably show the book to Mrs. Gable, but a sense of intrigue held her back. There was something about this unmarked volume, a silent pull, that made her want to examine it herself, to unravel its secrets. She glanced around the deserted, restricted section. No one was watching. On impulse, she slipped the book into her satchel, intending to take it home and look at it more closely. She knew it was against library policy, but she couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. That evening, after dinner, Sarah settled into her favorite armchair by the window, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. She carefully took the unmarked book from her satchel and placed it on the small table beside her. The silence of her cozy apartment amplified the mystery surrounding the volume. She hesitated for a moment, a sense of anticipation mixed with a touch of guilt, before finally opening the cover. The first page was blank. The second page was also blank. Sarah frowned, a little disappointed. Had she taken a blank book? She turned the page again. This time she found text. The script was elegant and flowing, written in a dark, almost black ink. The language, however, was unfamiliar. It looked vaguely like Old English, but with words and phrases she didn't recognize. Sarah, a lover of languages, found herself intrigued. She spent the next hour carefully deciphering the strange script, slowly sounding out the unfamiliar words. It was a painstaking process, but gradually, patterns began to emerge. She realized it was indeed an old form of English, but with archaic spellings and grammatical structures. As she began to understand the language, she realized that the book wasn't just any ordinary text. It seemed to be a collection of entries, each one dated with a future date. The first entry she managed to fully decipher was dated the following day and read, "The morning mail will bring a letter bearing tidings of unexpected fortune for the baker on Elm Street." Sarah chuckled to herself. A prediction about the baker's mail. It seemed rather mundane for such a mysterious book. She turned the page, finding another entry dated 2 days in the future. A black cat will cross the path of the town's mayor, causing him a moment of considerable consternation. These predictions were so specific, yet so ordinary, that Sarah couldn't help but be skeptical. It seemed like a strange sort of diary, perhaps a work of fiction written in an unusual style. She continued to read, finding more entries, each one predicting a seemingly random event in the near future. The next morning, Sarah almost forgot about the book. It wasn't until she was walking to work, passing Elm Street, that she remembered the first prediction. She glanced at the bakery, noticing the owner, Mr. Henderson, standing outside, a wide smile on his face as he read a letter. He looked up and waved at Sarah, his expression radiating pure joy. "Good morning, Sarah. Wonderful news today," he called out. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Had the book's prediction actually come true? She dismissed it as a coincidence, a lucky guess. There were countless letters delivered every day. The chances of one bringing good news to someone were fairly high. But the thought lingered in the back of her mind as she went about her day at the library. Later that afternoon, while walking home, she saw the town's mayor, Mr. Thompson, a notoriously superstitious man, stop dead in his tracks as a sleek black cat darted across the road directly in front of him. Mr. Thompson jumped back, clutching his chest, his face a mask of comical alarm. Sarah stared in disbelief. 2 predictions from the book had come true in a single day. It couldn't be a coincidence. A shiver ran down her spine. What kind of book was this? Over the next few days, Sarah continued to read the book, carefully noting the predictions and then observing the town to see if they came to pass. To her astonishment, they all did. Small, seemingly insignificant events, a child finding a lost toy, a sudden rain shower in the afternoon, a bird flying into the library window, all were foretold in the book's cryptic entries. Sarah's initial skepticism had completely vanished, replaced by a growing sense of awe and a touch of fear. She knew she had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. A book that predicted the future? It was the stuff of legends, the kind of thing you read about in fantasy novels, not something you found hidden in the restricted section of a local library. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something incredibly powerful, and perhaps even dangerous. What were the origins of this book? Who had written it, and how was it possible for it to predict the future with such accuracy? She knew she had to be careful. This was something she couldn't just dismiss or ignore. This was something that could change everything. Sarah's fascination with the mysterious book grew with each passing day. The accuracy of its predictions was uncanny, bordering on the unbelievable. She started to treat it almost like a daily newspaper, checking its entries each morning to see what the day and the days ahead held in store for the residents of Oakhaven. The predictions remained largely mundane. A local shop would run out of a particular item, a minor traffic accident would occur on Main Street, a specific flower would bloom in the town square. Yet without fail, each prediction came true. The novelty of it was initially thrilling. Sarah felt like she possessed a secret knowledge, a glimpse into the unfolding tapestry of time. She found herself subtly influencing events based on the book's predictions, though always in small, harmless ways. If the book foretold that a friend would have a bad day, Sarah might call them in the morning to offer encouragement. If it predicted a minor inconvenience for a neighbor, Sarah might offer a helping hand beforehand. It was a strange and exhilarating feeling, having this almost godlike ability to see and subtly shape the future. However, as the days turned into weeks, a sense of unease began to creep into Sarah's fascination. The predictions, while mostly trivial, were also relentless and unavoidable. It was as if the book was chronicling every minute detail of the town's existence, leaving no room for surprise or spontaneity. The magic of knowing the future started to feel more like a burden, a constant reminder of the predetermined nature of events. Sarah also began to wonder about the implications of possessing such a book. If this book could predict the future, who else knew about it? What were its origins? Could it be used for more nefarious purposes? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She had initially taken the book out of curiosity, but now she felt a growing sense of responsibility for its existence. She tried to research the book's origins. She meticulously examined its cover, its pages, its binding, looking for any clue, any symbol or inscription that might offer some insight. But there was nothing. The book remained stubbornly anonymous, its secrets locked within its cryptic script. Sarah considered showing the book to Mrs. Gable, but she hesitated. What would she say? "I found this unmarked book in the restricted section, and it predicts the future." Mrs. Gable would likely think she had lost her mind, or worse, that she had somehow fabricated the whole thing. Sarah needed more proof, something tangible she could show. She decided to confide in her best friend, Emily, a practical and down-to-earth journalist for the local newspaper. Sarah knew Emily would be skeptical, but she also knew she could trust her to listen without judgment. One evening, Sarah invited Emily over for dinner. After they had eaten, Sarah carefully placed the unmarked book on the table. "Emily, I need to show you something," she said, her voice a little nervous. Emily raised an eyebrow, her gaze fixed on the strange volume. "What's this? Some rare find from the library?" Sarah nodded. "Sort of. I found it in the restricted section. It's a bit unusual." Emily picked up the book, turning it over in her hands. "No title. No author. Looks pretty old." "It is," Sarah replied, "and it does something incredible." Emily looked at her, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Oh yeah? What's that? Does it dispense wisdom? Tell fortunes?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It predicts the future." Emily burst out laughing. "Come on, Sarah. You're pulling my leg, right?" "I'm serious, Emily," Sarah insisted. "Look at this." She opened the book to an entry dated the following day. "A small dog wearing a blue sweater will escape its yard on Maple Street." Emily's laughter subsided, replaced by a look of skepticism. "Okay, Sarah, I'll play along. Let's see if your magic book is right tomorrow." The next day, Sarah and Emily met for lunch. As they were walking through town, they turned onto Maple Street and stopped dead in their tracks. Trotting down the sidewalk towards them was a small terrier, wearing a blue sweater. Emily stared in disbelief, her mouth agape. "No way," she whispered. That's impossible," Sarah smiled faintly. "That's just one example. It's been happening every day since I found this book." Over the next few days, Sarah showed Emily more predictions from the book, and each one came true with startling accuracy. Emily, the seasoned journalist, struggled to find a logical explanation. She checked for any hidden cameras or elaborate pranks, but there was nothing. The book simply seemed to know what was going to happen before it actually did. Emily, ever the reporter, became as intrigued as Sarah. They spent hours discussing the book, its potential origins, and its implications. They considered the possibility that it was a very elaborate hoax, but the sheer volume and accuracy of the predictions made that seem unlikely. "Sarah, this is huge," Emily said one evening, her eyes wide with excitement and a touch of fear. "This could change everything we know about time and reality." Sarah nodded, the weight of their discovery pressing down on her. "I know," she said, "and I'm starting to get really worried about it." The predictions in the book were still mostly mundane, but Sarah had noticed a subtle shift. They were starting to become slightly more significant, more personal. One entry had predicted that Sarah would receive an unexpected phone call from a long-lost relative. The next day, she had indeed received a call from an aunt she hadn't spoken to in years. Another entry had predicted that Emily would receive a job offer from a larger newspaper in the city. That offer had come through just yesterday. The increasing personal nature of the predictions was unsettling. It felt like the book was not just observing the town, but also observing them. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were somehow connected to this mysterious volume, and that its predictions might eventually have a profound impact on their lives. The unbelievable had become their reality, and the question now was, what did the future hold? And could they do anything to change it? The line between fascination and fear blurred for Sarah and Emily as the predictions in the unmarked book became increasingly personal and impactful. The book had moved beyond forecasting minor local events and was now delving into the specifics of their lives, revealing details they hadn't shared with anyone else. It was as if the book had become intimately connected to their very existence, a silent observer and chronicler of their destinies. One morning, Sarah found an entry dated for the following day that sent a chill down her spine. Sarah will suffer a minor injury while attempting to retrieve a book from a high shelf in the library. Sarah, who was slightly shorter than average, often had to use a small step stool to reach the higher shelves in the library. The prediction was so specific, so tailored to her daily routine, that it felt less like a prophecy and more like a premonition, a warning. The next day, Sarah was extra cautious at work, avoiding the high shelves altogether. However, later in the afternoon, Mrs. Gable asked her to retrieve a particularly large and heavy art book from the top shelf in the restricted section. Reluctantly, Sarah brought out the step stool. As she reached for the book, her foot slipped on the stool and she stumbled, narrowly avoiding a fall but scraping her arm against the sharp edge of the shelf. A small cut appeared, drawing a bead of blood. It was a minor injury, just as the book had predicted. The incident shook Sarah deeply. It was no longer possible to dismiss the book's accuracy as mere coincidence. It felt like their lives were somehow intertwined with its pages, their futures already written in its mysterious script. Emily, equally unnerved, suggested they try to use the book to their advantage. "Sarah, if this book can really predict the future, maybe we can use it to prevent bad things from happening," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Maybe we can change the future." They decided to test their theory. The book had predicted that Emily would have a flat tire on her way to work the following Monday. On Sunday evening, Sarah and Emily carefully checked Emily's car tires, ensuring they were properly inflated and free of any punctures. On Monday morning, Emily drove to work, her anxiety building with each passing mile. To their relief, she arrived at the newspaper office without incident. They had seemingly defied the book's prediction. However, their relief was short-lived. Later that day, Emily received a call from her landlord. A tree had fallen in the night during a sudden, unexpected storm, crushing the roof of her parked car. The car itself was undamaged, but the roof was severely dented. It wasn't a flat tire, but it was still a significant vehicle-related mishap, occurring exactly as the book had foretold, albeit in a slightly different form. The experience was both unsettling and enlightening. It seemed they couldn't simply prevent the future from happening. The book's predictions had a way of manifesting, even if their attempts at intervention slightly altered the details. It was as if fate had a way of course-correcting, ensuring that the overall outcome remained the same. The more they experimented with the book, the more they realized the limitations of their ability to change the future. They could perhaps nudge events in a slightly different direction, but the core predictions seemed immutable. It was a humbling and slightly terrifying realization. Then, the predictions started to become more significant, more alarming. One entry, dated a week in the future, read, "A fire will break out at the Oakhaven Public Library in the early hours of the morning." Sarah's blood ran cold. Her sanctuary, the place she loved more than anything, was going to burn. The thought was devastating. She immediately showed the entry to Emily, her hands trembling. "We have to do something, Sarah," Emily said, her voice filled with urgency. "We have to warn Mrs. Gable, the authorities. We have to stop this from happening." they debated what to do. If they went to the police with their story about a book that predicted the future, they would likely be dismissed as delusional. Mrs. Gable, while kind, was also a stickler for rules and might react badly to Sarah having taken a book from the restricted section. They decided to try and prevent the fire themselves. They spent the next few days meticulously checking the library for any potential fire hazards, ensuring all electrical equipment was in good working order and that there were no flammable materials left unattended. They even stayed late one night, patrolling the building, their anxiety growing with each passing hour. The night the fire was predicted arrived, and Sarah and Emily were on edge. They had alerted Mrs. Gable to their concerns, vaguely mentioning a feeling of unease without revealing the book. Mrs. Gable, though skeptical, agreed to have the security guard conduct extra patrols that night. At around 3 a.m., the library's alarm system blared through the quiet town. Sarah and Emily, who had been nervously monitoring the situation from Sarah's apartment across the street, watched in horror as smoke began to billow from the library's roof. The fire department arrived quickly, but the fire had already taken hold. Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. Despite their efforts, the prediction had come true. The library, her beloved sanctuary, was burning. The unbelievable had become a devastating reality. And as she watched the flames lick at the night sky, she couldn't help but wonder what other dark secrets the future, as foretold by the mysterious book, held in store for her and the town of Oakhaven. The line between observer and participant had blurred, and she knew their lives would never be the same. The aftermath of the library fire cast a pall over the town of Oakhaven. The beloved building, a repository of countless stories and memories, was now a charred and water-damaged shell. Sarah felt a profound sense of loss, as if a part of her own identity had been destroyed along with the books. Mrs. Gable, though heartbroken, was grateful that no one had been injured. The cause of the fire was deemed to be an electrical fault in the old wiring, something Sarah and Emily had checked, but had apparently missed. The prediction in the unmarked book had come true, despite their best efforts to prevent it. The realization was both sobering and terrifying. It seemed that the future, as foretold by the mysterious volume, was not easily altered. Sarah and Emily continued to study the book, their initial fascination now tinged with a growing sense of dread. The predictions were becoming more frequent and more ominous. One entry, dated just a few days in the future, read, "A serious accident will occur at the intersection of Main Street and Elm Street, involving a red truck and a blue sedan." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. That was a busy intersection, one she and Emily used frequently. The prediction was vague enough to be almost commonplace, yet the mention of the specific colors of the vehicles sent a shiver down her spine. They decided they had to try and intervene again. They spent the next few days warning people they knew who regularly used that intersection, urging them to be extra cautious. They even considered contacting the police, but they still lacked any credible explanation for their warning. On the day of the predicted accident, Sarah and Emily found themselves nervously watching the intersection from a nearby coffee shop. They saw a red truck approaching Main Street from Elm, and a blue sedan heading towards the same intersection from the opposite direction. Their anxiety reached fever pitch. They were about to witness a serious accident, and they felt powerless to stop it. Just as the two vehicles were about to collide, a young boy on a bicycle suddenly darted out into the intersection, directly into the path of the blue sedan. The driver of the sedan slammed on the brakes, swerving to avoid the child. The red truck, unable to stop in time, collided with the rear of the sedan. It was a significant accident, just as the book had predicted, but the presence of the child had altered the specifics, perhaps preventing an even more serious collision. Sarah and Emily stared at each other in stunned silence. It seemed their attempts at intervention could sometimes slightly alter the details, but the core event, the essence of the prediction, would still come to pass. It was a frustrating and unsettling realization. The question now was, what was the purpose of this book? Why had it come into Sarah's possession? Was it simply an observer of time? Or did it play a more active role in shaping events? Sarah felt a growing sense of responsibility for the book. She had taken it from the library, and now it seemed to be predicting potentially dangerous events in her town. She couldn't just ignore it. She had to find out more about its origins, its purpose, and how to control its influence. She decided to delve deeper into the history of the Oakhaven Library, hoping to find some record of the unmarked book. She spent hours in the library's archives poring over old ledgers and donation records. She learned that the restricted section had been established many years ago, containing a collection of rare and unusual books donated by various prominent families in the town's history. One name kept appearing in the records: the Blackwood family. They were one of the founding families of Oakhaven, known for their eccentricities and their extensive collection of rare books and artifacts. Sarah discovered that a significant portion of the restricted section had been donated by the Blackwood estate decades ago. Intrigued, Sarah focused her research on the Blackwood family. She visited the local historical society, hoping to find more information about their collection. She learned that the Blackwoods had a long history of interest in the occult and the esoteric. There were rumors of strange experiments, secret societies, and a fascination with the mysteries of time and prophecy. Sarah found an old photograph of the Blackwood family library, a vast room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. In one corner of the photograph, she spotted a small, dark, leather-bound book that looked remarkably similar to the one she had found. The realization hit her like a revelation. The unmarked book likely belonged to the Blackwood family, and it had somehow ended up in the restricted section of the public library. But how had it acquired its ability to predict the future? And why had it remained hidden for so long? Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency. The predictions in the book were becoming more frequent and more concerning. She knew she had to understand its power before it foretold something truly catastrophic. The unbelievable had become her reality, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind the book's extraordinary abilities, even if it meant delving into the shadowy history of Oakhaven's most enigmatic family. Sarah's research into the Blackwood family led her down a rabbit hole of local legends and forgotten histories. The Blackwoods, it turned out, were more than just eccentric collectors. They were rumored to have been deeply involved in arcane practices and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Stories circulated in hushed whispers among the older residents of Oakhaven about strange rituals conducted in the Blackwood Manor, a long-abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, and whispers of a family curse that had plagued the Blackwood line for generations. Sarah discovered that the family's interest in prophecy and divination dated back centuries, with tales of Blackwood ancestors who claimed to possess the ability to see glimpses of the future. The unmarked book, she began to suspect, was somehow connected to this family legacy, a tangible manifestation of their obsession with time and fate. Emily, ever the pragmatic journalist, approached Sarah's findings with a healthy dose of skepticism, but even she couldn't deny the mounting evidence pointing towards the Blackwoods and their unusual history. Together, they decided to visit the abandoned Blackwood Manor, hoping to find more clues about the book's origins and purpose. The manor stood on a secluded hill overlooking Oakhaven, its darkened windows like vacant eyes staring out at the town. The once grand building was now dilapidated and overgrown, a testament to the passage of time and the family's eventual disappearance from local records. A palpable sense of decay and mystery hung in the air as Sarah and Emily cautiously made their way through the overgrown grounds. Inside, the manor was even more eerie. Dust lay thick on every surface, and cobwebs draped like ghostly shrouds across the decaying furniture. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories. Sarah and Emily explored the silent rooms, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. They eventually found their way to what must have been the family library, a vast room with towering, empty bookshelves. The silence here was particularly profound, as if the very air held its breath. As Sarah scanned the room, her gaze fell upon a large, ornate fireplace. Above the mantelpiece, partially hidden by a thick layer of dust, was a family crest. And beneath the crest, etched into the stone, was a Latin inscription: Tempus revelat omnia. Time reveals all. The inscription sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. It felt like a direct connection to the book and its prophetic nature. They continued to search the library, carefully examining the remaining fragments of the Blackwood family's collection. They found old journals filled with cryptic writings, diagrams of strange symbols, and references to a chronarium, a device, or perhaps a book that could reveal the secrets of time. In a hidden compartment behind a false bookshelf, they discovered a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle and yellowed, but the handwriting was still legible. It was the diary of Elias Blackwood, a prominent figure in the family's history, who lived in the late 19th century. As Sarah carefully turned the pages, she realized she was reading the first-hand account of the creation of the unmarked book. Elias Blackwood, it seemed, had been obsessed with the concept of precognition. He had dedicated his life to studying ancient texts, conducting experiments, and attempting to unlock the secrets of time. The diary detailed his painstaking research, his breakthroughs, and his eventual success in creating a book that could indeed glimpse the future. Elias Blackwood described using a combination of arcane rituals, astronomical observations, and a unique form of meditative writing to imbue the book with its prophetic abilities. He wrote about the limitations of the book. It could only predict events within a certain radius of Oakhaven, and its predictions were often cryptic and open to interpretation. He also warned of the potential dangers of wielding such power, the temptation to interfere with fate, and the unforeseen consequences that could arise from such actions. Sarah and Emily read the diary with rapt attention, finally understanding the origins of the mysterious book. It was a product of human ingenuity and a deep fascination with the unknown, a testament to one man's relentless pursuit of the impossible. The diary ended abruptly with Elias Blackwood expressing concern about the book's growing influence and the potential for it to fall into the wrong hands. He hinted at a hidden mechanism within the book, a way to control or perhaps even destroy its power, but the details were vague and incomplete. Sarah felt a profound sense of responsibility. She now understood the book's origins and the potential dangers it posed. She had to find a way to control it, to prevent it from causing further harm or falling into the wrong hands. The unbelievable had become her burden, and she knew she couldn't simply ignore it. The fate of Oakhaven, and perhaps even more, might depend on the secrets hidden within the pages of the unmarked book and the forgotten history of the Blackwood family. The quiet life of a librarian had taken an extraordinary and terrifying turn, and Sarah knew her journey had just begun.